Hello, good crowd. I am so excited. One of my dearest friends, one of the people I admire most in the whole world, is with us today. This is Warner Woodworth. He's the founder of, or co founder of like 40 plus NGOs. He's an emeritus professor at the Marriott School of Business at Brigham Young University and an extraordinary human being. You don't want to miss this episode. In fact, let me just put this into perspective here for you quickly. Think of the Dos Equis guy, claims to be the most interesting man in the world, right? Well, Warner Woodworth actually is the most interesting man in the world. So stick around. You don't want to miss this.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devon Thorpe.
Our sponsor, Johnson & Johnson, matches most individual donations up to $250 at caringcrowd.org. Warner, welcome to the show.
Hey, Devin, how are you?
I'm great. I'm excited because I have with me today on the show the most interesting man in the world. So
You've been watching too much late night TV. You're what
probably
I call interesting.
Probably. I'm not interesting. You're interesting. But listen, you have had just an extraordinary career spent working with an emphasis on helping people who are resource poor to access more opportunity. I almost don't know where to begin, but let's just start with the platform that you've worked from throughout your career. You have been at the Marriott School of Business, which is owned, at Brigham Young University, owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But your approach to business is not typical. How does your approach to thinking about business interact, fit into the bigger picture of BYU and the Marriott School?
Well, that's a tough one. BYU prides itself on being focused around the notions of free markets and capitalism. And I'm for that stuff, but I want a humanistic capitalism. I've worked to empower the poor so they can get a piece of the action. And free markets are a great way to do that, but we need to be sure that the playing field is level and that lots of people have opportunities. My share of criticism from my colleagues and my students, and letters from their parents, and letters from their church leaders sometimes to church officials in Salt Lake or the administration. But bless their hearts, the big boys have always said, Warner, you're doing something unique, something we value greatly. You're reaching lots of people, none of us can. And you're not just talking, you're making change in the world. So it's worked out to be a pretty positive experience. And when I've taught at Michigan or Claremont or Brazil or Hawaii or other places, when I've had to get out of Provo for a year or two, get my kids in another culture, I've always been happy to come back and be part of the great community here at BYU. We have a kind of stewardship community where we try to support one another and bring out the best in people. So I felt very fortunate, even blessed from a religious perspective.
Well, it is a fascinating history that you have created there. You've been at BYU working now for 40 or 50 years, haven't you?
Yep, 40 years.
Yeah.
Hey, I just see, are you seeing me okay?
I turned off your camera because our connection isn't very good, but let's just continue our conversation. We'll record the audio and I'll put up an interesting picture of you and we'll go from there. But Warner, you have used that BYU platform in such an interesting way because you have launched one after another of these NGOs with other colleagues. And so you have stayed at BYU essentially throughout your career, but you've continued to sort of spin out all of these NGOs. Tell us about some. I know Unitas is one that you helped to launch. Tell us a little bit about how you got that going.
Well, it was after a decade or more of other startups. And my approach was with most of these we'd get some ideas, we'd see some needs, we'd formulate a little NGO, usually in my classes, organizational behavior, MBA, public management courses. And we would get those organizations up and going and raise some money. And once we had some staff and some board, I'd pull out after 2, 3, 4 years and let it roll. Some I was with them 10 years or 12 years. With Unitas, some colleagues of mine from both the East and West Coast, people I didn't know at the time, started flying out here telling me they'd read one of my books. They had money. They wanted to know what to do with their money. And it was kind of one-on-one visits. And after half a year or more of that, I said, well, you guys are eating up all my time. Let's get together. Let's have a little seminar. And so we started meetings at a boardroom of a colleague here in Provo. And that sort of dialogue, questions, then led to let's stop talking and let's start doing something. And some of these guys were pretty wealthy. They'd been vice presidents of Silicon Valley tech companies, or they'd been recipients of Harvard PhDs in economics, but they didn't really believe microcredit worked, or worker ownership, worker cooperatives, this Mondragon stuff, or Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. They weren't sure this was viable. I said, well, let's go to Bangladesh. Let's go meet Mohammad Yunus. And I was able to connect with him. He's been a good colleague for many years and a partner. And I've been on a couple of his boards. He's been on several of mine. I said, Yunus, when are you going to be in Bangladesh? I'd like to bring these guys over to visit. We'll fly in Bob's personal jet. It's embarrassing, but we'll do it. And he gave me a schedule, and finally we negotiated a deal in which he would be in Bangladesh for a week, and he would give us 4 hours every morning to meet, talk, debate, question, challenge. And then we'd have lunch at the bank there. And then our team could spread out throughout the bank and meet with the managers over marketing or the executives in the accounting department. They would look at fundraising strategies. They'd look at women borrowers, how the training goes, what the HR system is. So we did that for a week, and we flew corporate. We did not fly with the corporate jet. That got to be competitive, so we flew with international airlines. But it was a great experience. And at the end, they came back and said, yeah, let's do this. And so we started Unitas, and we launched our first little NGO in Tula, Mexico. So we could take donors down there one day, have them see the operation, meet the people, see the borrowers, discover what poverty really is, and then fly back the next day from Utah. So we started with that model, and then we realized we don't want to be starting our own NGOs. We want to fund existing, because there were 3,000 or 4,000 by then. Most of them didn't have the capital.
I see.
So we became a microfinance accelerator. And since then, we've raised hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow. It's fascinating. One of the NGOs you launched was Mentors International. That was one of these on-the-ground NGOs making these small loans to entrepreneurs. How did that come about?
Well, yeah, it was the very first I did. And it came about because I spent a year in Hawaii. And Filipinos there, in my courses I was teaching and writing a book there, with my family for a year. And these kids were saying, Professor, please, when you finish up here and move back to BYU in Provo, figure out how you can go help our people in the Philippines, our aunts, our uncles, our parents. We're here. There's no jobs in the Philippines. When we get done, we're going to have to go back to the Philippines because we're not citizens of the US. And there's no opportunities there. And I discovered quickly about a country I knew nothing. Philippines used to be number 2 economy in Asia. By the late 80s, it was number 2 from the bottom, not number 2 from the top.
Wow.
And then Marcos had cleaned the coffers with Imelda's shoes and lots of other purchases.
Yeah.
And so I committed to them and got some students. We taught a first little course called Social Innovation, I think it was. Maybe it was Social Entrepreneurship. But it was apparently the first type of course like that in the country. And just a handful of kids took it. I got a friend to give us $10,000 to fund these students to go over and spend the summer as grad students from BYU. And they went there in Manila, lived there, saw the few charities that were in that country and saw the needs. And we developed a business plan at the end of the summer. Had a bunch of big shots from the US and Manila and elsewhere fly in and spend a week sharing our proposal to start a new NGO. Called it Enterprise Mentors International. Or I guess the first one was actually called Philippines Enterprise Development Foundation because it was in Manila. And then we started 2 others. And back here in the States after that summer and so forth, I started raising money and we put together a board with some of those that helped fund the initial exploratory study, and it took off from there. And I remember my colleagues and some of the administration at BYU saying, Warner, that's wonderful. It's a good thought. It's got no future. You can't give loans to poor people. You know, the Philippines is too complicated and it's a third world society and so forth and so forth. And so I kind of am happy to say we were blessed. We worked hard. Many people helped. And that little organization has continued since 89, 90.
Yeah.
And
I've done a couple of episodes with mentors people on the show. So yeah, great organization.
And it did the impossible. Because it didn't die. The course kept going. And that kind of course is now at 600 universities being taught every year, some 2 or 3 times a year. And mentors became a role model to other startups who felt they couldn't do it. And they heard from their friends, this is not viable. And yet they pulled it off. And it just has grown since then. And that little organization has helped 5 million people. And it's given out about 1 million loans. And we raised $103 million that we gave in loans. That's not overhead. That's not travel. That's not staff. That's actual capital to help the poor help themselves.
Yeah. Brilliant work. Warner, as you look back over these 40 years, what are you most proud of having accomplished?
Boy, that's tough. I don't know if it's pride, but I know it's gratitude because my life has been so blessed being able to rub shoulders with the have-nots of the world, being able to sit in a hut, a mud hut in Mali, West Africa, and hear a woman describe the 3 babies she lost at birth. But because of our NGO, 5 years later, she had a 4th child. And then she brings that child in, and that child is 7 or 8 or 10 years old, depending on the story in the case, healthy and happy. And we build a school in that village so that child has a chance to get an education and maybe go to college someday. So those kinds of opportunities. I've had men and women in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, come up to me with their new infant place that baby in my arms, and because I'm a dad and a grandpa with 10 kids and 25 grandkids, I'm always friendly and happy. And I get big smiles, and I'm thinking, oh, they've got such a beautiful baby. We're going to help them have a better future for that child. And then the dad says, or the mom says, Werner, we would like to give you our baby to take back to America so he can live forever and so he can have a good life. And it's a sense of gratitude I have for my blessings, also a sense of sorrow to tell them, I'm sorry, your baby belongs to you. You need to nurture and help it, and we're going to help improve the quality of life for you and the other 1,000 people in your village or in your barrio or whatever. So I've had lots of blessings, great experiences.
Werner, you have had lots of great experiences and lessons. What's the biggest, most important lesson you take from the 40 years you spent in this work?
I guess one notion would be, and I say this a fair amount, Devin, I say, changing the world is easy. All it takes is blood, sweat, and tears. So I try to tell people early on, a big lesson about all this is it's not easy. If you're doing this in my class, you a team of 6 MBAs, and you're doing it for a grade, don't waste our time. Do something else. But if you have passion, if you believe that the suffering in the world is real, if you see yourself as someone with capacity, getting a great education, having a brilliant future, maybe you'll get a sense that you can have an impact and you can make a difference. And your career, whatever it is, in nursing, in accounting, going to law school and becoming an attorney, being an entrepreneur, being a business person, being a school teacher, being a housewife, with all that blessing that comes to you from that future career and that income opportunity and your own health and happiness, maybe you can extend your vision of influencing others so they can enjoy a bit of what you're enjoying. And so I try to encourage people to take the risk, but to be in it for the long term, not just quick and dirty startups. And that's kind of my view, I guess.
Yeah. There is I think an important discussion in the world of philanthropy and good doing around a narrative we sometimes tell ourselves of rescuing the poor or helping the needy, and our role as kind of a savior figure. How do you think about that after 40 years at this?
Yeah, that's a pretty common perspective. And as we start these NGOs, as we've struggled to get them off the ground, as we brought in new donors or new board members, I often get that from many people. And I'll let it kind of go the first few times when people are congratulating themselves on being so righteous or so generous.
Mm-hmm.
Good people, because they're rich white guys in the United States with more money than they know what to do with, and they need tax deductions and other benefits. And then I start teasing them like that, and critically and hilariously asking them questions and trying to help them get a sense of our own spiritual and economic and social impoverishment as rich Americans, as middle class US citizens, as wealthy Europeans, or the few rich I know in Asia or Brazil or Mexico that have donated to our causes. And I try to make them get a little uncomfortable. And I talk about the richness and the joy of the people in the villages of the world, those coming out of Rwanda after the genocide, those emerging that I've worked with in Mozambique after a 15-year civil war, those of other countries where 1 million people have died of HIV/AIDS, of floods, of tornadoes. And I try to tell these folks their lives. I try to tell the Americans, the donors, our board members, their lives in those countries are such a source of joy to me. I hope you can learn to listen. I hope you can go do humble development, not charity where you're the giver and they're the receiver. I hope you can go with an open mind to learn and listen and understand the richness of their lives and how much you and I, with our big college degrees and our law school graduations and our PhDs, how much we still have to learn from the world's have-nots because of their mere financial poverty, because their family is rich, the psychology there is rich, they're happier than our country is. And we have so much to learn if we can just listen and be respectful. But it's hard because we have big pride and we have big egos, and I've seen way too many condescending people. I learned not to be that way when I was 19 years old and lived among the poor in Brazil for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Salt Lake, which was a nice middle-class city with lots of white people around, even though I was in inner city Salt Lake. When I got to Brazil and saw blacks and saw discrimination in a country everybody told me had no discrimination because Brazil was a melting pot, and I saw the oppression, I saw the poverty, I came back saying, I know my mission in life, I know my purpose, and it's to help people like that and to learn from them and collaborate and build partnerships.
You've certainly lived up to that. Warner, what is your superpower?
I don't have stuff like that. I avoid superhero movies. My grandkids want me to go see that stuff. I say, that's all fake. That's all fake. I don't think there's any kind of superpower I have.
What makes you successful?
Well, I suppose I'm a disruptor. I'm a change agent. I tell my classes at the beginning of every semester, you're not here to call me Dr. Woodworth or Herr Professor or Brother Woodworth in the Mormon Church. Just call me Warner. I'm a student like you. We're all scholars. We're all trying to learn together. And I'm going to try to disrupt your paradigm and challenge your assumptions. And I'm going to hope, as a renegade, I can kind of shake you up a bit and be a catalyst to help you find a more authentic life and a great future that's not going to be just a job, because that's not enough during your 60, 70, 80, 90 years on this earth. I want you to figure out how you can be an agent for transformation. And I'm here to help empower you to do that. And hopefully we can together build a sense of community. So those kind of values and those kind of motivations, along with a huge component of high ethics and commitment to social justice and peace, those are the values that are pretty much burned into my brain and into my heart.
Warner, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I just can't thank you enough. Before you go, would you take a minute and tell people how they can connect with you on social media or at BYU?
Sure. Maybe the best place to start is my personal website. I took down the BYU one when I quit my day job. I like having quit because now I can be in Zimbabwe on Saturday. And if we have a problem with our NGO, I can stay a few extra days instead of having to fly home to teach that MBA class Monday morning. But so I have a website, warnerwoodworth.com. You can also find me on Facebook and LinkedIn and a bunch of other websites by other people around the globe. And I have a couple of networks besides Warner Woodworth on Facebook. I have a couple of other organizations. One is NGOs Worldwide. Another group is a consulting outfit called Social and Entrepreneurship Consulting, LLC.
Excellent.
I'm probably on some jail records and prison records someplace, so they could find me through sources. They're down on the wall at the post office for that.
All righty, Warner, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We wish you every success in your ongoing efforts to change the world.
Well, thanks so much, Devin. I appreciated getting to know you recently, and I'm certainly impressed with the great work you've done personally to explore and contribute and give of your talent and skills to the poor, as well as communicate and build your website and podcast that's influencing so many.
Yeah, thank you, Warner. Let's do some good.
All right. Thanks so much.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thanks for tuning in to the Your Mark on the World show, the Social Impact Podcast. Please subscribe via YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Spotify.